The bus was late. I checked my watch for the third time, the minutes dragging on like hours. The cold night air seemed to seep into my bones, making the wait feel even longer. Fog hung heavy in the air, swirling around flickering streetlights. The mist created an eerie atmosphere, making the familiar street look like a scene from a ghost story. I hugged my jacket tighter, shivering. The chill was relentless, and I could feel it gnawing at my resolve to stay patient. Finally, headlights cut through the gloom. The sight was a small relief, a promise of warmth and shelter from the biting cold. The bus groaned to a stop in front of me. Its old frame creaked and moaned, as if it too was weary from the night. I climbed aboard, relieved to escape the cold. The warmth inside was a stark contrast to the freezing night outside. The air inside was stale, heavy with the smell of damp fabric and something faintly chemical. It was a mix of old upholstery and cleaning agents, a scent that was oddly comforting in its familiarity. It sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced around, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me. The bus was nearly empty. The few passengers that were there seemed lost in their own worlds, their faces hidden in the shadows. Only a handful of passengers were scattered throughout the bus, their faces obscured in the shadows. They were like phantoms, silent and still, adding to the eerie atmosphere. I chose a seat near the front, hoping to avoid conversation. The last thing I wanted was to engage with anyone in this unsettling environment. As the bus rumbled back to life, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The engine's growl seemed louder than usual, and the bus's movements felt more jarring. This late-night ride was already feeling stranger than usual. The combination of the fog, the nearly empty bus, and the silent passengers created a sense of unease that I couldn't ignore. I stared out the window, watching the dark streets pass by, hoping that the ride would end soon and I could leave this unsettling experience behind. The engine coughed, spewing out a cloud of black smoke. It was an old bus, one that had seen better days. The kind of bus that made you wonder if it would make it to the next stop without breaking down. We lurched forward into the night, the bus groaning with every turn of its wheels. The road ahead was dark and deserted, illuminated only by the occasional flicker of a streetlight. I stared out the window, watching streetlights blur past. Each light seemed to stretch into a long, glowing line, creating a surreal, almost dreamlike effect. Each one illuminated the empty seats around me. The bus was eerily quiet, with only a few scattered passengers, each lost in their own world. Where was everyone going at this hour? The streets were empty, devoid of life. It felt like we were the last people left in the city. The silence on the bus was unnerving. No one spoke. It was as if we were all afraid to break the stillness, to acknowledge the strangeness of the situation. The only sounds were the rumble of the engine, and the occasional cough from someone in the back. Even those sounds seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. I tried to focus on my book, but the words swam before my eyes. The dim light made it hard to read, and my mind kept wandering back to the empty seats and the eerie silence. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the bus, every rustle of clothing made me glance around nervously. Every time I looked up, it felt like a pair of eyes darted back into the shadows. Were they real, or just a figment of my imagination? My heart pounded in my chest. The fear was irrational, but it was there, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I wished I had taken the later bus. Maybe then, I wouldn't feel so alone, so vulnerable. But it was too late now. All I could do was sit and wait, hoping that the journey would end soon and that I would be safely home. At the next stop, an old woman shuffled onto the bus. She wore a tattered shawl, and her face was creased with wrinkles. Her eyes, though, were sharp and piercing. They seemed to follow me as she moved down the aisle. She stopped beside my seat and leaned down. Her voice was a dry rasp. "Are you going far, dearie?" I swallowed hard. Just a few more stops. She chuckled, a low, rattling sound. "We all have a destination, dearie. Some journeys are just shorter than others." Then, she moved past me and took a seat in the back, her eyes boring into my back. Her words echoed in my mind. What did she mean by that? I tried to dismiss it as the ramblings of an old woman, but a chill ran down my spine. The bus rumbled on, deeper into the night. The air grew colder, biting at my skin even through my jacket. I could have sworn the temperature had dropped 10 degrees, and then I heard it, a soft whisper coming from the back of the bus. I strained to listen. It was the old woman, her voice a low murmur, but I couldn't make out the words. It was like she was speaking in a language I didn't understand. The whispers grew louder, joined by other voices. Murmurs and groans filled the air, swirling around me like the fog outside. I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. The bus, the whispers, it was all too much. I glanced at the other passengers. They sat motionless, their faces hidden in the shadows. Were they in on this? Were they part of this nightmare? Fear clawed at my throat. I had to get off this bus, now. I stumbled to my feet, my legs shaky beneath me. As I fumbled for the stop request, a hand closed around my wrist. It was ice cold. I whirled around, my heart pounding in my chest. The old woman stared at me, her eyes burning with an eerie light. "Where do you think you're going, dearie?" she hissed. "The ride's not over yet." "Let me go!" I cried, trying to pull away, but her grip was surprisingly strong. The bus rumbled past my stop. I watched in horror as the streetlights I knew so well disappeared into the distance. We were heading further away from the city, deeper into the darkness. "What do you want from me?" I choked out, fear constricting my throat. The other passengers remained eerily still, their presence somehow more menacing than the old woman's grip. The old woman leaned in close, her breath cold against my ear. "You're one of us now," she whispered. "You boarded this bus, and now there's no getting off." Panic surged through me. I had to escape, but how? The windows were sealed shut and the doors wouldn't open until the next stop. But where was the next stop? And what awaited me there? I glanced towards the front of the bus. The driver sat slumped over the wheel, his face obscured by the shadows of a wide-brimmed hat. Was he in on this too? Or was he another victim of this nightmare ride? "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What is this place?" the old woman cackled, a chilling sound that echoed through the bus. This is the in-between, dearie, a place for lost souls, for those who wander in the dark." Her words sent a fresh wave of terror through me. Lost souls? Was this some kind of afterlife? Had I died without realizing it? The thought was too horrible to comprehend. I scanned the bus, searching for any way out. My eyes fell on the emergency exit window. It was a long shot, but it was my only hope. "Let me go!" I shouted, pushing against the old woman with all my might. To my surprise, she stumbled backward. I didn't hesitate. I ran for the emergency exit, scrambling onto a seat to reach the latch. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a vortex of despair. Cold, bony fingers grasped at my clothes, trying to pull me back. But I was determined to escape this nightmare, no matter the cost. I managed to get the window open, a rush of cold air hitting my face. But before I could squeeze through, the bus lurched violently to a halt. I was thrown forward, crashing into the seat in front of me. Groaning, I looked up. The bus driver was gone. The old woman was gone. The other passengers were gone. I was alone. The engine sputtered and died. Silence descended upon the bus, heavy and absolute. I was free. But where was I? And how did I get here? I cautiously stepped off the bus, my breath visible in the cold night air. The fog swirled around me, thick and impenetrable, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Each step felt like a journey into the unknown, my senses heightened by the eerie silence that enveloped the area. The fog had cleared, revealing my surroundings in stark detail. I could now see the outlines of the buildings, their windows dark and lifeless, like the eyes of long-forgotten ghosts. The streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. I was in a deserted parking lot, surrounded by abandoned buildings. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves, or the distant hum of the city that felt worlds away. The air was thick with the scent of decay and neglect, a stark contrast to the bustling life I had left behind. The city lights seemed miles away, a distant memory of safety and warmth. Here, in this forsaken place, I felt completely isolated, as if I had stepped into a different realm altogether. The darkness was oppressive, pressing in on me from all sides, making it hard to breathe. Suddenly I heard a noise. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder, more insistent. My heart began to race, the sound echoing in the empty space around me. I strained my ears, trying to pinpoint its source, but the shadows seemed to shift and dance, obscuring my vision. A low growl coming from the shadows behind the bus. It was a sound that sent chills down my spine, primal and menacing. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, my body instinctively preparing for flight or fight. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest. The world seemed to slow down, every second stretching into an eternity. My eyes darted around, searching for the source of the growl, but all I could see were the shifting shadows, playing tricks on my mind. Two glowing eyes pierced the darkness, their owner hidden from view. They were unblinking, fixed on me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I could feel their gaze boring into me, a silent threat that promised danger. The growling grew louder, closer. Each step it took seemed to reverberate through the ground, a steady, ominous rhythm that matched the frantic beating of my heart. I could feel the tension building, the air thick with anticipation and fear, and then I saw it. Emerging from the shadows, its form becoming clearer with each passing second. My mind raced, conjuring images of monsters and demons, the stuff of nightmares. It wasn't a monster or a demon or any of the horrors I had imagined. It was a dog, a big, scruffy dog, its fur matted and dirty, but its eyes filled with a surprising gentleness. A big, scruffy dog, wagging its tail excitedly. The tension that had gripped my body melted away, replaced by a wave of relief. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. The fear that had seemed so real just moments ago now felt like a distant memory. Relief washed over me, followed by a wave of exhaustion. The adrenaline that had kept me on edge drained away, leaving me feeling weak and shaky. I knelt down, reaching out to pet the dog, grateful for its unexpected presence. I had escaped the nightmare bus ride. The journey had been long and harrowing, filled with moments of doubt and fear. But now, with the dog by my side, I felt a sense of peace and safety that I hadn't felt in a long time. But the memory of those whispers, of those cold, dead eyes, would stay with me forever. They were a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of the light, always waiting, always watching. And though I had found a moment of respite, I knew that the journey was far from over.